Greetings, my friends. I'd like to share with you a thought that I've been having and thinking about it based upon an observation that I've made in the cities, in the communities, even on an international level. I've made the same observation. And I'd like to start by asking you a question. If I were hungry and I read a book about beef stew, for example, would it satiate me? If I were thirsty and I read a book about cold water, would it quench my thirst? If I were interested in seeing the world and I read a book about all of the beautiful cities in the world, would that give me an experience of the cities of the world? I see in African American communities a preoccupation with the Bible. Every time something is mentioned, someone says, "Is that in the Bible?" And when someone tries to convince you of a point of view, they show it to you in the Bible. And I've seen recently on street corners people arguing about the Bible. I see Israelites in the cities standing, reading from the Bible, attempting to invalidate other groups. Likewise, I see other groups seeking to invalidate the Israelites. I see the Christians seeking to invalidate the Jews. I see the Jewish people attempting to invalidate the Christians, all based upon a book. This book that we did not author. Now, prior to our enslavement, we lived in a peaceful world without a book that was called the Bible, because our level of awareness and harmony with the laws of nature allowed us to do so. There was love for our neighbor. There was sharing. Our women and children were not abused. Our families were not broken. We had institutions that taught our cultural values and norms. And yet, when the colonizers came, they came with a gun and a Bible. The gun was used to decimate those who did not surrender their will to the will of the colonizers. And the Bible was used to ensnare the mind into a book of stories that were frankly irrelevant to our culture, not pertinent to our being. But we were acculturated by the colonizers to accept in this book, these stories, as the Word of God. Of course, God was never defined, so the assumption was that there was this man in the sky. It was a man, wasn't a woman. And he watched everything, and he judged everything, and he punished those who violated his will, and he blessed those who did not. And that was the posture of which we were introduced to this book during slavery. We were Christianized by virtue of our acceptance of this book. We were given a concept of salvation. That is, that we were fundamentally fallen and unclean, and we needed to be cleansed. But the only way that we could be cleansed was by believing in a story in this book. And the story had occurred some 2,000 years ago. And it's about a story of a man who was resurrected, but only a few people saw this resurrection, and you would assume if someone was resurrected, they would be seen by everybody, the world, in fact, to facilitate this belief in a resurrection. We were also told that in order to be cleansed, we had to be cleansed by the blood of this man who died. That was called vicarious atonement. Atonement my sins were atoned by the blood of someone else. And this was given to us in the format of a story. We don't know the author of these stories as a part to what was called this book that we have is 2 parts. One book that the colonizers gave to us said, well, this is called the Old Testament, and it's invalid. You don't have to believe that. But you can read it out of curiosity if you're interested, because we're going to compile a book, and this book is going to consist of writings from 2 different groups of people. The initial people were the Israelite people, the Yehudis, that wrote that they were enslaved. They were the children of Yaakov, in which there were 12 tribes. And this 12 tribe descended down into Egypt. The remnant of this 12 tribes, this man created 12 tribes, 12 sons, and his sons went to Egypt, Mitzrayim, and were enslaved, and they were delivered. And God spoke to them on top of a mountain and gave them a law. And they must believe in this law in order to be synchronized with the goodness of God, this God. The other part of the book is a story of a woman having a child without a man. And this child is a holy child. He is God incarnate. So we move from the first part of the book, where God is a spirit, into the second part of the book, where God is a human, a man. And this man dies for the sins of the world. And we were taught by the same people who came to us with a gun in the Bible, killed and destroyed many of us. Millions of us were killed on the route to enslavement in what's called the Middle Passage. And those who survived the Middle Passage were beat severely and treated without human dignity, usurped of their dignity, beat, scolded, miseducated. And for hundreds of years, this is the case of our people here in North America. And that took place. And in the 1619 on up to the 1865, around in there, we were issued emancipation. We were free. And so we carried into, quote, our so-called freedom, which was freedom to be yourself, self-determination. We carried into our own existence this book, this mythological stories that we didn't write. We don't know the authors of the book. Someone said the old part was written by God and the new part was written by some men who wrote it long after the central character of the story, Yeshua, had resurrected from the dead. He wrote nothing. Everything is hearsay. Nothing that he said that he wrote down. So we have a book of hearsay about what God incarnate said and what he did. And then we have those who, after he had ascended back into the heavens, were commissioned to spread the story of his miraculous life. And we believed it. Bought it hook, line, and sinker. So now when you talk to anybody, they want to know, are you a believer? They have lots of scriptures to back up a point of view about this belief. And this is just the Christian religion. Other religions have another book. But this conversation that I'm having with you really is addressed only to Black Americans. White people gave us this book. They talk about Christianity and a world of love ye one another. And of course, we haven't ever experienced that because we have been the brunt of humiliation, violence, killing, hanging, ever since we stepped on these shores. The one thing that we have is this book, and this book teaches us to be docile and to love those and forgive those who hurt us, while those who perhaps authored the book sure Caucasians author the book, continue to denigrate us, kill us, imprison us, beat us, and to usurp our dignity from us. So we have a people now who argue amongst themselves in churches. Conception, again, of those who enslaved us. So we follow their model. We teach their teachings. We believe in their system. We believe in blood atonement and the necessity of salvation. And now that we've become, let's say, emancipated, we've been free, unquote, quote, unquote, for approximately 160 years. Millions of us now read and study. We study the original writings of the Torah in Ivrit. Some of us study the Greek. And we know now that this truth, this name Jesus, there's no such character in history named Jesus. There was no white man named Jesus. God never came to the white people and told them nothing. There's no white people in this book. Yet we believe in the Torah. And then we see the New Testament, the Greek people writing, but nobody written specifically to us to say anything. We're just the recipients of someone else's truth, embracing someone else's truth. So, having seen this and witnessed the disunity that exists between black people based upon their perception and perspective in this book, whether you're a Jehovah's Witness, you have one perspective. If you're a Christian, you have one perspective. If you're a Rastafari, you have one perspective. If you're a Yehudi, you have another perspective. And we argue and we fight and we don't love each other based on this book. And those who profess to be Christians, black people now, our society is just bankrupt. Education is gone. Mass murder and killings is commonplace. Family is broken. Marriage denigrated. Sexuality is elevated. The community is broken. And yet, every Sunday we flock into these churches because we've been afraid, we've been conditioned, we've been conditioned to believe that if we don't believe, you're going to go to hell, because that was a part of the conditioning. Said you have to believe in Jesus, because there's only one name by which man has salvation. That's the name of Jesus. Well, we find out now there's nobody by that name, so that wasn't a truth, or it's a half-truth. And we're seeing now that the fact that we believe in this character has no practical benefit for the people who believe in it. It's still second class, still uneducated, still hate each other, still hate the people who superimpose this, quote, good news upon us. The people who gave us the good news still have built prisons for us. We are incarcerated by the thousands all across this Christian nation of brotherly love, where this man said, love ye one another as I have loved you. I'll give my life for you. We don't see any of that. We see in this book that homosexuality is abominable. But now we see the same people who taught us that polygamy was wrong and our culture was wrong say now we have to embrace homosexuality because that's the law of the land. It's same-sex marriages have been legitimized, which is why now Africa is taking a stance against the church's teaching that same-sex marriages can be blessed, because the book says it's an abomination. And the family has been broken, and the definition of family has been changed. The definition was that man marries a woman. The woman and the man were created by God to create children who would be taught about God. Well, that's no longer the case. Now men marry men, women marry women. We used to have gender-specific male and woman. Now we have who knows how many genders. So, and all of this is coming from this book. Now we see a deviation from this book. But my people, the African Americans, are steeped in this book only for the reason that they feel that if you don't believe in this book, if you don't have Jesus, you're going to go to hell. Not understanding that this is their hell. There's no hell to go to after you die. There's no hell to go to. It said, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth, not the heaven, the hell, and the earth. And these are relative phenomena created to be enjoyed here based upon your state of consciousness. So, observing this and seeing this for 75 years, I wrote an article, and I'd like to read it to you. It's entitled, A Book About God is Not the Experience of God. There's no monolithic African American culture. There's considerable diversity within a multi-layered population. Notwithstanding the cultural, educational, and socioeconomic stratifications within, belief in the Bible is a central tendency. By and large, African Americans are believers and adherents to the Bible. This is a fact borne out by statistical data from the Pew Research Organization. Black Americans are generally more religious than their white counterparts, owing to their history of hopelessness and optimism that the biblical teachings inspire. Within the African American population, 66% are Protestants, 6% are Catholic, 3% are of other religions like Jehovah's Witnesses, and 3% have non-Christian affiliations like Islam. Research conducted by Jeff Diamond, a senior writer-editor for the Pew Research Organization, focusing on the religion at the Pew Research Center, reported that 81% of African Americans believe, according to the Bible, that God has the power to control what goes on in the world. Continuing, 74% are of the opinion that God is the judge of all. 68% believe that God determines what will happen in their lives, and 48% report that God talks to them directly. So in light of these statistics, it's plausible to conclude that the Bible is perhaps the most potent elixir given to Africans once they reach these shores. The Bible has been and remains an important element in shaping of the African American consciousness. This notwithstanding, the Bible nor religion has afforded African Americans an experience of oneness with their Christian counterparts in social status or in equivalent human dignity. The 21st century is an age of enlightenment, an unprecedented historical period in which the superstitions are questioned, examined, and discarded. As an educator, philosopher, critical thinker, and author, I am writing to suggest that the preeminent status given to the Bible among African Americans be re-evaluated. It is time to acknowledge that while extolled and glorified, the Bible does not have the ability to raise consciousness and elevate our people out of the doldrums of mental slavery, self-hatred, and violence that characterize our historical posture. Continuing, African Americans must acknowledge that prior to being enslaved, our societies were not overshadowed with stories that did not reflect our identity or our history. We had an oral tradition that reflected our experiences and our perceptions and our values of the world until we were colonized. Nevertheless, without a book called the Bible superimposed by the colonizers, African societies functioned harmoniously in concert with the laws of nature. There were no guns, crime, murder, abortion, or the abuse of women and children. There wasn't any need to conceive a soteriological doctrines such as salvation and vicarious blood atonement. These theological concepts were imposed on Africans by the same people that enslaved them and were acculturated during the wretched days of slavery. Until the present day, these doctrines are embraced and perpetuated among our people. On the pre-missionary African continent, owing to the synchronicity with nature, there was a level of morality and God consciousness exhibited in the collective consciousness. The modern-day English translation of the King James Bible is a compilation consisting of writings from two different groups, the Israelites and the Greeks. Now, public information is presented in two forms: scientific data and stories. Data is facts and statistics collected together for reference and analysis. A story, on the other hand, is a person's representation of the facts of a matter, an account of imaginary or real people or events told for entertainment, adventure, identity, and morality. In light of these definitions, it seems to me that the Bible, therefore, is a book of stories. Stories are not actual accounts of historical facts, although some facts may be included. These stories, which reference God, are didactic. They're intended to teach ethics and morality. I argue, however, that a thought about God or a book about God is not the experience of God any more than a pitcher of food can alleviate hunger or satiate a hungry man. The Bible cannot produce the experience of God, even though it is widely distributed and read conscientiously. An ideal society will flourish when its citizens are empowered by the direct experience of God. What is the definition of God? In the book of stories, the Bible presents an anthropomorphic, gender-based identity. This notion is a vestige of the age of slavery, when God was depicted as a bearded man, a white man, up in the sky, making judgments on humanity. Now, the age of enlightenment, that is the 21st century paradigm, is a scientific paradigm rather than a theological one. The concept of God is no longer anthropomorphic, which means man, God is a man. No, God is not a man. Not up in the sky making judgment. But the word God has become an acronym for the words for the generator, G-O-D, generator, organizer, and the dispenser of existence. The word God, as used in the 21st century, references the infinite, unbounded, pure field of potentiality, an unmanifest realm that is characterized by a three-in-one structure: the knower, known, and the process of knowing. By learning how to transcend the thought of God, the reality of God beyond thought is directly experienced. Transcendence opens human awareness to the home of all the laws of nature, allowing the infusion of divinity into the mind. This divinity becomes the basis of an individual's being, thinking, and actions. The stories about God in the Bible, on the other hand, informs only the intellect. In order for behavior to change, the mind and the heart must be transformed through a direct experience of pure divinity. The quest for meaning, truth, and enlightenment has evolved to a level that compels Hebraic literacy in the Lashon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue, to allow us to read the Torah in the holy language of Lashon HaKodesh, which has neurophysiological impact that influences our thoughts, actions, behavior, cultivates into our spirit divinity. While the Bible stories activate emotional sentiments and cause mood making, they in no way refine the neurophysiological mechanisms of perception sufficiently to experience the divinity with God. It is this author's view that in order to optimize the spiritual potential inherent in the African American soul, Bible stories should be exchanged for the experience of God. Instead of reading about God, the African American must become God conscious, must become conscious of the ultimate reality that is God. It is man's incarnation objective to become unified with that reality. The scientific research of Dr. Keith Wallace in the 20th century validated a fourth state of consciousness. This scientific discovery ushered humanity into the portal of the inner kingdom of heaven, which is also stated in this book, but how to get there there's no formula for that. So it's just a statement that the kingdom of heaven is within. Black Americans are still found floundering in churches, engaging in antagonistic street corner debates with one another about a book that they did not author, while our communities are replete with killing, violence, broken families, and the lack of brotherly love. The Bible has become the quintessential source of division. It profits little spiritually. Arguing about the Bible militates against the experience of our spiritual oneness and ensnares the soul in divisive jargon. The kingdom of heaven is indeed within everyone. The African American must educate himself regarding the authentic nature of the self. This can be achieved only when two important philosophical questions are addressed. First one, beyond the relative biological level of color, who am I? And number two, what is the objective basis for the subjective experience of I? What is meant by that reference, I? By answering these two questions, African Americans will inevitably be led to experience and discover and experience the unified field of consciousness, freed from duality, ever firm in purity, independent of possessions. This is the kingdom of heaven within, the source of infinite wisdom. A book about God is not the experience of God. A book about San Francisco is not the experience of San Francisco. A book about food does not satiate a hungry man. We are indeed thirsty. We are indeed hungry. We are thirsty for the refreshing experience of God. We are hungry for the experience of God. For it is only the experience of God, the direct experience of God, that will transform our low level of thinking. Thinking and behavior comes from a level of consciousness, and based upon the emptiness of our society, the killing, the murder, the lack of knowledge, the broken family, the onset of homosexuality within our communities is a direct indication of a low level of consciousness that is incompatible with the stories of the characters in the Bible. Yeshua is called in the Bible the Son of God. And it says in this book called the Bible, in Psalms 82:6, they even approached Yeshua and said, "We don't like you because you say that you are God. And Yeshua turned to them and said, in this book, but isn't it written in your words? Before he quoted the Psalms, Psalms 82:6, it is written, ye are gods, ye shall die like men, because we are individualized expressions of the pure intelligence, the divinity of Hashem, the divinity of God. God is a word, an acronym for the generator, organizer, dispenser. God now is pure consciousness, uninvolved with activity. Activity in this world is a consequence of the laws of nature that give rise to evolution. Going to the church, giving your money to a man or an institution that builds a building, not build you a school or build you a library, but builds another building for you to come and listen to another sermon about food, another sermon about how Yeshua fed the 5,000, another sermon about him being resurrected the dead, rather than you having a technology of consciousness that resurrects you from the dead. The dead here that's used is not a physical death, but a dead that goes with the word negro, nekros, dead, dead to themselves, dead to the impulse of intelligence and divinity that you essentially are as a God man. For we were, as black men, made in the image of God. We are the fathers of creation, but we have been enslaved by the forces of evil for the purposes of denigrating us. And we have been denigrated and now integrated into a society that further diminishes our capacity to self-determine. And we gather together on Sundays to have a book, and we shout and rejoice about these stories in the book. When we look outside the window of the church, we see brokenness. We see broken glass everywhere, streets filled with dirt, run-down schools, pregnant girls, effeminate men, broken families. But we rejoice about going to heaven one day because we've been told a lie about heaven being somewhere up in the sky. Because in this book, we see Yeshua going up to the heavens. This is a metaphor. This is foolishness. And it's time for someone to take a stand and say, when will you, black man, raise your dialogue, your level of consciousness and thinking to understand that everything is consciousness. Consciousness is the 21st century paradigm. When will you ascend to know this? The scientists have validated this. Dr. Keith Wallace has discovered that there's a certain unique physiological condition, hypometabolic state, cerebral hemispheric integration, more coherent thinking that gives rise to higher levels of being, higher levels of perception, experience of God within, technologies of consciousness that takes the mind into the subtle fields of their own subjectivity, transcending that to experience the source of their relative being. This is the God, this is the generator, this is the organizer, this is the field of consciousness, the dispenser of all. God is all. Indeed, God is all. Indeed, God is one. Indeed, there is nothing else but God. And I am that, thou art that. All of this is nothing else but that. And it's time for African Americans to raise your level of dialogue, to put aside the book of slavery, because the premise is wrong. The premise of the Christian model is read stories about God in the Bible and you will be good. Well, we've been reading these stories about God in the Bible and the stories about Yeshua in the Bible for years, and we're still not good, because good does not characterize our community. Good does not characterize our behavior toward one another. We kill one another. We hate one another. We black people hating black people killing black people because they are disconnected from themselves. And who are you, black man? You are made in the image of God. And anybody made in the image of someone is a reflection of the image that they were created in. And what is the goal of worship? The goal of worship is not being met by black Americans, because the goal of the worshiper is to become united with that which he worships. And that cannot happen when you do it in a book, because a book is nothing but written words on a page, letters on a page that have no life unless they are holy language like Ivrit. Then there's a neurophysiological component. There's an elevation of consciousness, which is where we came from. So this talk that I'm giving you today, my brothers and sisters, is only for you brothers and sisters. It's not for the white people. It's not for anybody else that doesn't have melanin, who has been born in the niggerdom, a word that I created for a community that is replete of spirituality, because we all only have a book, and a book about God is not the experience of God. A story about the resurrection is not your resurrection, and making mood about the resurrection does not reflect an authentic level of consciousness, because when the mood making is over, your level of consciousness is realized by the lack of compassion that you have for your fellow man, the find that you steal from one another and you kill one another all the time. So what you need to do, African American, is go within. Answer those two philosophical questions. Beyond my color, because we have a dialogue now. I'm black. Well, yes, but that is just a garment. I'm no more black than I am purple. This purple is my garment. This purple is not me. And if you say you saw a purple man today, you will have missed the point, because I am not the purple. I am the level of consciousness that is enclosed with purple. I am not the physiology. I am the physiology that covers the I. Because the second question is, beyond your physical color, what is the I? Who is the I? And the next question, what is the reference for the subjective experience? What is the objective reference for the subjective experience of I? What do you mean when you say I? And we know that I is consciousness. I am. I exist. This body is a temporal fluctuation in time and space that comes and goes. Just like this couple shirt that I put on, I can put it on and take it off. This body I put on and take it off long down the card of time. But I, an impulse of infinite intelligence, divinity, that's all-knowing and eternal, always, that's the G-O-D. That's what makes a man G-O-D. When you have cultivated within your awareness the union with the ultimate reality, then you become that in time. You become the God-man. Yes, your destiny is God. Yes, you are God. You are God potentially, but you are not God actually, because you have no technology of consciousness to take you into the infinite field of pure potentiality, so that your mind can become infused with that divinity, and your behavior then becomes consistent and compatible with that which is referenced as God. So you have to, black man, wise up to rise up. And when you rise up and wise up, you'll know that a book of stories about God is not God. You are the God. Learn to go in. The kingdom of heaven indeed is within. And when you are established within that kingdom of heaven, then you are beyond duality. You are beyond the activity. You are no longer the actor, but the witness to the activity. You are cosmic of your Godship, and you witness activity, and you live in the sanctuary of God, praising God through adoration of this sacred divinity that you have become. You love your neighbor as yourself, because yourself is the neighbor, because the eye of the eye is the eye of the eye. So this is my gift to you today. Some of you it will offend. Some of you it will bless, because some of you are sick and tired of living in this mess of killing and murder and adultery and abortion and racism, systemic racism, and church every Sunday and drunk on Monday and violating the laws of evolution, not living in synchrony with the divine laws that structures evolution. pure bliss, pure being. When you establish in your inner being, you exist in a state of blissfulness. Blissfulness is a word meaning fulfillment. Nothing is missing. When you are in a state of religion, you're begging God foolishly to have some more stuff. And stuff and things are of the relative, which pass away in time. Everything must change. Someone made that song. It's true. Everything changes. That's the nature of the relative. That's the nature of the physical world. But you, being an impulse of divinity, black man, are eternal, ageless, timeless. You are the God. You are an impulse of the generator, the organizer, the dispenser. You are an individualized aspect of consciousness. So may you be blessed to grow and to know this one truth, that a book about God is not the experience of God, only the experience of transcending the thought of God gives rise to the experience of God. Transcend your subjectivity, experience your objectivity, and become one with the ultimate reality. Baruch Hashem, Shema Israel, Hashem Eloheinu, Hashem Echad, God is one.